Support WrestleTalk!
Hi there, enough small talk. I'm Adam from WrestleTalk, and here are this week's 10 news stories you might have missed. Number 1, John Cena nearly turned heel. Back when WWE did their twice-in-a-lifetime feud between John Cena and The Rock, which Ollie and I recently attempted to rebook on Parts Fun known at I1, of course, not that anyone's counting or anything, the fallout of the first match saw Cena enter a downward spiral as he got a little too cocky from the encounter, attempting a people's elbow during their WrestleMania 28 match, which allowed Rock to get the victory. According to Cena himself, Vince McMahon apparently toyed with the idea of turning Cena fully heel during the feud. Appearing on the Pat McAfee show, Cena said that Vince wanted to turn him heel, and he was up for doing it, but reminded Vince that he can't just switch back to being a babyface straight after a la Shawn Michaels at SummerSlam 2005. They'd have to stick with the heel turn after, which is what swayed Vince to decide against it in the end. So really what Vince wanted was for him to play heel against Rocky, but wanted to keep up the merch sales from being the top babyface. Sounds about right. Cena, of course, would then stay babyface forever and was killed by a clown at WrestleMania 36, and we never saw him again. Number 2, NXT's creative new direction. So far, during NXT 2.0's run, it's definitely become a lot more WWE, hasn't it? With distraction finishes, DQs, double countouts, a bloody crowbar on a pole match, a supernatural fireball shot from the hands of a face paint demon which periodically takes over the body of a wrestler, and a very cross Peter, which are all on this week's episode alone. The main roster style of booking has been seeping its way into the former black and gold brand, with a whole bunch of backstage NXT releases recently, gutting the brand of Triple H's crew that helped to mold the original NXT into the highly regarded brand that it was. Where does that leave the creative? Well, according to PW Insider, the NXT creative team now report directly to Bruce Pritchard and Christine Lebrano, much like the Raw and SmackDown creative teams do, which explains a lot, honestly. In the same report, they mentioned the lead writer for NXT will now be Johnny Russo. Another Russo? Is he related to Vince? Is this why there was a crowbar on a pole match?
Listen, bro, the only way these things get over, bro, is if you put them on a pole, bro. And it ain't my fault that these kids can't get over in front of the NXT crowd. You gotta put these things on the pole, bro. Otherwise, how will the people get invested, bro?
This is also most likely why there have been a lot more main roster crossovers of late, with Riddle and AJ Styles both making appearances and having matches on NXT 2.0. And speaking of main roster and NXT crossovers, number 3, Karrion Kross's main roster plans. Do I have to keep talking about this? I think we all know how the story goes by now. Karrion Kross was your NXT champion after squashing and demolishing the entirety of the NXT roster, got called up to the main roster, and immediately lost to Jeff Hardy in 2 minutes. He then turned into a gimp, was irreversibly damaged, and then released, and also Scarlet ? What a great run. Good job, everyone. Kross has recently had a couple of very insightful interviews with Chris Van Vliet and Renee Paquette, where he spoke on his call-up and plans for the main roster before, all of that happened. Speaking with Chris Van Vliet, Kross mentioned there was originally talk of him facing Randy Orton, Bobby Lashley, Drew McIntyre, Bray Wyatt, and Roman Reigns on the main roster, and all of those sound much, much better than what we got. Instead, we managed to arguably get the worst NXT call-up of all time, followed by his prompt release. Once again, just a great job. Number 4, 2 NXT call-ups imminent. Sticking with the theme of NXT call-ups now, since NXT has been attacked with paint, there's seemingly much less room for 1.0 stars, with Samoa Joe relinquishing the NXT Championship right before the first episode, Johnny Gargano and Kyle O'Reilly both leaving the company, and most recently Tommaso Ciampa and Pete Dunne both lost their respective feuds with 2.0 talent. Ciampa dropped the NXT Championship to newbie Bron Breakker, while Pete Dunne lost his crowbar in a pole match to Tony D'Angelo. In recent times, both Ciampa and Dunne have been included on main roster touring schedules, with Ciampa defending the NXT Championship against Dunne. Both of them featured on this week's episode of Main Event, which is a surefire way to figure out who WWE is trial running before a main roster call-up. Let's just hope it goes better for Ciampa and Dunne on the main roster than it did for other people featured on Main Event before their debut, like Bronson Reed and Karrion Kross. Number 5, Kenny Omega tests positive. Switching over to AEW briefly, Kenny Omega hasn't been seen on our screen since the Dynamite episode after Full Gear, where after dropping the AEW World title to Hangman Page, he said he'd be away for a bit as he needed injuries to heal up. This reportedly took the form of multiple surgeries, as there were an awful lot of injuries he was working through. Good God, Kenny Omega, please calm down. There's another unfortunate bit of news to add to the list, however, as Omega revealed this week he has tested positive for COVID-19. Best wishes to Kenny, and we hope he gets better soon. Number 6, Shinsuke Nakamura injured. One of the more common complaints from Shinsuke Nakamura's Intercontinental title reign was, is he champion? I guess he is. WWE sure seem to have forgotten, and he very rarely actually defends his title. And recently, the focus of his segments on TV has been on his guitar-playing partner, Rick Boogs. Boogs addressed this when he appeared on the Out of Character podcast with Ryan Satin, where he mentioned that Shinsuke is actually dealing with a hand injury right now, which is why he's not competing in the ring. I guess he did his hand shaky thing a bit too hard. Actually, that's a bit crass. Sorry about that. He said that Nakamura has been dealing with the injury for about 2 months now, so he's just waiting for the time where he can get cleared so the two of them can do some good stuff together, as they've only wrestled a couple of matches as a team. Number 7, Big E didn't know about day 1 finish. Yeah, it's a couple of weeks later, we're still talking about the fact that Big E lost his WWE title to Brock Lesnar in a match that Lesnar wasn't originally even booked in, with Big E taking the pin for no reason. I'm not mad about it. You're mad about it. Stop talking about it, you. There have been many conflicting reports since January 1st of the original plans for the match before Lesnar's last-minute inclusion, as the WWE on Fox account tweeted out a picture of the day 1 results with the graphic saying that Big E won, giving some credence to the fact that Big E was going to retain. But there's also been reports saying that Seth Rollins was the one who was actually going to pick up the win instead. Big E himself has now spoken about the original plans for the match, speaking with Justin Barrasso Sports Illustrated, and he said he didn't know who was supposed to win. I got to the building thinking we were going to have our 4-way. I didn't know about Roman being unavailable until our afternoon, a few hours before the show. That threw a wrench into our match, as well as ripple effects to Raw and SmackDown. I never heard a finish for the 4-way. When it became a 4-way, especially one so loaded, anything was a possibility, but I hadn't heard anything about a finish. Sounds about right for WWE, to be fair. Number 8, Shayna Baszler defends Alexa Bliss feud. Oh, spooky bollocks is back. Great. I mean, Alexa Bliss is great, and she returned to Raw this past week, and she's still got those spooky powers, hasn't she? Like, she can do telekinesis. You think that'd be pretty handy for wrestling? She could throw her opponents across the ring with her mind. Now that I say that, I think I want to see a self-aware spooky character where all their opponents get mind thrown around, devolves into their opponent taking bumps and wrestling themselves. It sounds all right. Anyway, do you remember last year where it wasn't fun? Alexa Bliss, Shayna Baszler, and Nia Jax were feuding. Also, Reginald was there. In case you forgot, there was the mirror incident where Shayna Baszler locked herself in a cupboard and then died, I think. There was an awful lot of mind control and, of course, bountiful amounts of spooky bollocks. Now, you think that might be embarrassing for Baszler to do, what with her being a legitimate former MMA fighter and such, but according to her, she enjoys it and has defended the feud. Speaking to Metro UK, Baszler mentioned that the segments did good YouTube numbers, so it must be good. Also, she liked doing the feud and those spooky segments because she got to show a side of her with more layers. I don't know if any of those layers came across on TV at all, but it's nice she enjoyed herself, you know? It's nice. That's nice. Number 9, Ring of Honor announces return. In December last year, Ring of Honor put on their final pay-per-view, Final Battle. At roughly the same time as they announced they would be going on a hiatus when they tried to figure out their next move as a company, they also released all their talent from their contracts. A lot of people thought that was it for the company, but thankfully, it now seems we know when their return will take place, as it was announced this past week that Ring of Honor will return in April for the Supercard of Honor after a whole bunch of Ring of Honor talent invaded Impact Wrestling's Hard to Kill last week. According to Brian Alvarez on Wrestling Observer Live, once Ring of Honor does return, their focus will be on 3 primary titles, their men and women's world titles and their tag team titles. This means their 6-man, television and pure championships will be shelved. This seems to be part of their new direction as a company, so we'll have to wait to see how it all comes together in April. And number 10, Wardlow to WWE? No. Earlier this week, there was a report from WrestleVotes that WWE were very interested in trying to entice Wardlow to leave AEW and sign with them instead when the time came, which makes sense. He is a big guy, he's got some great in-ring charisma, and seems to be on the brink of a breakout moment in AEW. Why wouldn't they be interested? But that interest doesn't seem to go both ways, as Wardlow himself has mentioned he wants to be an AEW lifer. Speaking to PW Insider, Mr. Mayhem said, in 10 or 20 years, I'm going to be so excited and proud to look back and say I was one of the AEW originals. As far as the world knows, my career started with AEW, and it's going to end with AEW. I don't think there's any convincing me that the grass is greener on the other side. Seems pretty conclusive that Wardlow is sticking with AEW. Confirmed. And that is our list. What's been your favorite bit of wrestling news from this past week? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Make sure you make WrestleTalk.com your homepage for more up-to-the-minute wrestling news, and jam that jam.